Welcome back to the Ground Up Show. I'm Matt Diavella, and today I'm speaking with Melyssa Griffin. She's a successful entrepreneur that teaches business owners and bloggers how to grow their audience and skyrocket their income. We discuss the importance of building a brand with integrity, the psychology behind why we quit. We reminisce about some of our first paid gigs, and she gives me a ton of practical insights into creating a profitable course for my company. Advice that I'm sure many of you will be able to act on. It's a great episode, and I think you're going to like it. But before we get to that conversation, if you like this podcast and you liked Minimalism, a documentary about the important things, I've got something for you. I recently conducted interviews with the producers of Minimalism to give a detailed look at how we made the film. Those interviews with the minimalists Inspire are yours for free if you leave a review for the Ground Up Show on iTunes. Reviews help to get the word out for the show, and they help us to continue to do this. To get immediate access to the interviews, take a screenshot of your review and send it to hello@mattdiavella.com. Now, please enjoy my conversation with Melyssa Griffin. This is episode 28 of the Ground Up Show. Welcome back to the Ground Up Show. Melyssa Griffin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Can you just briefly tell me a little bit about the work you do right now and what you're really passionate about?
Yeah. So right now, and for the past couple of years, I've taught courses, workshops, and led online communities for people who want to start or grow their own online business. So I teach marketing and social media and email list growth and all of that kind of stuff. What I've been getting into more and more recently is not just teaching people the strategies of how to grow a business, but teaching them the mindset and the personal development that goes into that as well. Because what I found with myself, and this is something I'm so passionate about now, is that I could learn all the tactics, but if I wasn't personally growing, then my business wasn't growing. So I love teaching that aspect now too, of like, what can we heal or fix in your own life that's going to translate into your business too.
Have you always been a teacher trying to pass lessons along? Because I feel like this is a new role for me that I've been getting into, and it comes with a lot of doubt.
Yeah, I feel like teaching is almost this innate thing that I've loved since I was a kid. I remember color coding my brother's books, he's younger than me, when I was a kid, with like, these are the easy ones, medium and hard, and then trying to teach him how to read, teaching my beta fish how to do math, which wasn't very successful. And then in college and high school, always getting into organizations where I was teaching something. So it feels like this thing for me that's very natural and fun for me to do. I was also a teacher in Japan before I started my business. But there is still that level of doubt. And I think even if you've been doing it for a long time in your life, there's still that sense that, is anybody going to listen to this, or is anybody going to get results from what I'm teaching? So I definitely resonate with that doubt too.
I'm curious about how that doubt manifests.
My challenge sometimes is showing people kind of their actual potential and helping them work through these things. So I think you mentioned, how do you get over that doubt? And for me, I think it's two things. I think one, it's doing the thing that you're doubting. And I feel like the more you do the thing that you don't think you can do, the more you realize, like, actually, I can kind of do that pretty well. And you get better at it and you build that confidence. It's kind of like with sports or with a business. You realize that it takes practice to get better at doing something, but then we forget that in terms of our own development, that we're not going to be good at something the first time we do it. And we almost expect that when you start something, you're like, I should be good at this and I want people to like it. But it takes practice and effort to actually get to that point that people will like it and where you'll feel confident about it. So I think that's number one, is just doing it, building that practice and confidence. And then number two is, I think all of us have these areas of our life that often come from our past that need to be healed before we can really reach that full potential in our lives. And a lot of people watching right now or listening might be thinking, well, I don't need anything healed about me. I'm doing pretty well. Like, I had good parents, had a good childhood, I went to a good school, or whatever it is. And they feel like they're doing pretty well in their life. And that absolutely might be the case. And for a lot of people it is, but at the same time, there's still little insecurities, or there might be a trigger that comes up. Maybe the way a cashier at the grocery store treats you might make you feel upset or angry, or maybe the way a friend cancels plans last minute and that makes you think something about yourself. And we go through life with these little triggers and insecurities, and that manifests into doubt, and it manifests into anger or a lack of confidence. And we just kind of think that that's a natural part of life. But what I think is that the more we can heal those parts of ourselves that we've learned or learned from other people, the more we can be confident and really maximize that potential that we have in our lives. So it's doing it, getting confidence that way, and then it's healing whatever needs to be mended from your past to really accomplish the things that you want to do.
It sounds like a big part of this is growth and continuing to grow and understand that we always have room for improvement. There's always ways in which we can grow and build upon the work we've done in the past, as well as the people that we were in the past. Where does your story begin in terms of starting that growth process?
One, I think we all do have room for growth, but I also think we're all perfect as we are. It's kind of like this dichotomy of you are an amazing, worthy, perfect person, but you still have things that maybe it would help you in your life to grow.
Right. Isn't that like, it's a very contradictory message of self-improvement, is that you're perfect just the way you are, but you're not perfect, but like you should be the best version of yourself. Right. I do find that to be contradictory. How do you rationalize that?
For me, I kind of think of it as on almost this spiritual level that these are my own personal beliefs that kind of, we're all just vibrations, we're all energy, and that's a neutral thing. There's no like bad person because of like how they are as a vibration or energy, right? We're all just kind of this consciousness here on Earth or in the universe. But so that to me is neutral, and that to me is perfect because it's not good or bad, it just is. But then on the other side, we're having this human experience and we're living here on Earth. So why not make the most of it, and why not try and maximize that full potential? So I guess I see it in kind of like this spiritual realm of perfection, but then also this human realm of let's do the best that we can in our lives.
I feel that way a lot too. And how it manifests for me is the letting go and just accepting for who you are right now. And you might make mistakes, but as long as you try as hard as you can at a given thing, say a podcast or a film or whatever you're trying to make, you might fail. You might not execute the way that you wanted to, but you can always learn from that and move forward and grow. Right. Where does your story start in terms of so we know where you are now. I'm curious about how you got here.
Yeah. And you asked a minute ago about kind of my past in terms of how I've grown or what I've grown through. So I think they're both intertwined. So just to give you a little brief synopsis, I grew up with my parents. They got divorced when I was 1, and kind of my struggles that I've worked through and that have kind of defined how I run my business now are that I grew up just not really feeling connected to very many people. I didn't feel connected to my family. I didn't really fit in elementary school. So for me, I grew up feeling like I'm not loved, I'm not worthy, and all of these different stories that we kind of repeat to ourselves. So those are things that I've spent a lot of time with different coaches and therapists and whatnot to heal about myself. And they've also led me into the type of business that I have now, which is very community-based and very, I think, based in empathy for other people. So having that experience has made me really focused on wanting other people to feel seen and loved and worthy. And even though I'm teaching a lot of business tactics and strategies, I do it in a way where it feels like people are part of something and where they can have that kind of community to fall back on, people to really reach out to and connect with, versus feeling like they're struggling in a vacuum or they're building something in silence, especially if their family or friends aren't really on board with what they're trying to do. So after I graduated college, moved to Japan to teach English for 2.5 years. And towards the end of that, I was feeling this kind of disconnected, unseen feeling where I was living. It was kind of this feeling of I'm getting really good at speaking Japanese. I'm integrating into the culture, But now I'm realizing that as a white person, I'll never fully be part of the community, and somebody who comes from a different country, I'll never fully be part of the community. And it almost brought back these triggers of my childhood where I thought, like, I'm still not part of it. As hard as I try to be part of this community at school or with my family, I'm not part of it. So that actually led me to start my blog. I started it in 2013, and it was meant to be a place to just bring people together, to create a community about creativity and personal development, and just find my people online. And I did, and it ended up, and it was just for fun. I know we talked about this earlier, about how kind of when you start something without the expectation that it needs to become something, or it doesn't need to make money, it's just kind of for fun and for your own development. And that's where I started it too. So when it came from that place, it just became this really fun hobby and obsession. I got really into blogging and meeting people online and bringing people together. That kind of snowballed into a graphic and web design business that I had online for a couple of years, which eventually snowballed into what I do now, which is teaching courses and have a podcast and all that kind of stuff for entrepreneurs.
I want to specifically talk about the trip to Japan, because that's pretty radical for somebody in college to want to go to Japan. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Southern California.
Okay, so then to go to Japan is opposite side of the world. It's the culture is radically different. There's a lot of places you could have gone in Europe that would have felt more like home. Why was it Japan? What drew you there?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things was that the university that I went to was 50% Asian, and I got really immersed in Asian culture. A lot of my friends, even now to this day, are Asian and from all different nationalities, but I started learning more about it and the food and the culture, and it was really interesting to me. So that was a little part of it, of wanting to go somewhere in Asia. But then in terms of going to Japan, I applied for programs in other Asian countries too, and it wasn't really this planned decision. It was more, I want to go somewhere completely different, and there was a good teaching program at the time called JET that I did, and I was like, I'm just going to do that. And I don't really know anything about Japan. I don't know anything about the language, but I just want to go and have this different experience growing up in more of like the Southern California, almost sheltered, not too sheltered, but sheltered in the sense that you live in the same place your whole life experience. So that was really the only reason I went there.
Did you feel that risk of FOMO, that you weren't getting right into your career and you weren't just going to start making money right away and you were going to be going and teaching abroad?
I didn't, actually. I think I have that feeling more now in terms of things, but I think at the time it was almost FOMO if I didn't do something like that, because I'd seen friends study abroad, I'd seen people travel to all these different countries, and I didn't really ever have that experience. I've traveled a little bit when I was in high school and college, but nothing to that extreme of living abroad for a few years. And I think for me, it was just, if I didn't do it, I would have had FOMO. And I thought I wanted to be a teacher, and in many ways now I still am, but I thought this will be the start of my teaching career, and I'll do this, and then I'll become a teacher when I come back to the US.
That's a good point. Like, what better experience than to teach abroad? What was the first blog post that you did? What inspired the creation of the blog?
Yeah. So I'm trying to think what the actual first blog post was. I think it was, so when I lived in Japan, like I mentioned, I really wanted to foster this community aspect. And I also just love different creative pursuits and wanted to do something that brought people together around creativity. So I found this Japanese guy who spoke a little English, and he had some connections in the little city that I was living in. And he and I planned this kind of mini arts festival in our town where there were musicians that performed, and then people who were artists were able to we had a little almost museum where you can walk around and look at film photography and paintings and all that kind of stuff. And then there were different areas where you could create your own art. We had different random things that you could use to create something. And so the blog post that I wrote was just about that experience. It was called Wago Wago. And me in my early Japan years, I had no idea how to speak Japanese. And I literally just looked up the characters for unity and like unity among people. I was like, this sounds perfect for this little arts festival. And the word was Wago. And I was like, I'm just going to call it Wago Wago to make it extra unified. And then, so the post on the blog was really just about that, which seems kind of random now, but it almost was the catalyst for everything that I love talking about, which is very much this community and bringing people together around creativity and personal growth.
How did the writing influence you much? I found, at least in myself, that getting my thoughts down and actually, I'm curious if you journaled before this, but for me, like journaling has been a sporadic venture. Like every once in a while I'll get into it, then I'll fall out of it. But I do know that when I'm putting my thoughts down on paper, if I have a goal, somewhere that I want to go in life, a direction I want to head, did it for my documentary, wrote down every hope, dream, aspiration I had for that, what I wanted my future to look like, what I wanted my life to look like, the habits I wanted to change. And then from there, I was able to take action on it. It became real. Now that it was on paper, I had to commit myself to changing.
Right. I definitely feel that way too. And I've always loved writing also. So I think it came naturally and it was really fun. A lot of it was almost similar. It was like an observation I'd make about something somebody would say or do, and then I'd write about it because I think that's really interesting, the way they said or did that thing, or here's what I think about this, and kind of the lesson that I got out of that experience. So it almost was a journal in that sense that other people could read initially. But now, like you mentioned, I love journaling. It's something I try to do on a daily basis, at least writing gratitude or acknowledgements of things that I did well during that day. That I think that's kind of like a self-love practice of just not skipping over the things that you excelled at. So I try to do that every day. I think that's important too.
And then you transition from this blog to a service-based industry. Is that right? Into designing and to creating websites for people?
Right. So that was another thing that I've always just loved. I think I got a pirated copy of Photoshop when I was in 6th grade and have just been interested in design since then. So I've made little things like shirts and whatever throughout the years. And when I was doing this blog, I was in a job as an English teacher that wasn't really fulfilling me. I didn't really enjoy where I was working anymore and didn't feel like it was using my full potential. So as I was doing this blog, which started as just this fun hobby, I noticed that all these other bloggers were making a full-time income doing this online. I was like, how are they doing that? That's really cool. And I want to learn how to do that too.
That sounds dope.
Yeah, exactly. So I started researching it more, and I was like, what do I have that I could sell people? And I thought maybe because there's other bloggers who are selling their own design services, and I thought I could probably do this because I've been practicing it as a hobby throughout my life. And I just decided to start a little web design studio. And I think because I started the blog as just this way to build community, to bring people together, the web design studio started doing really well very quickly because I had this little audience of people who became my clients and would refer people to me. So the blog was like the most important thing, I think, in terms of my business. And I still think it is for the business that I have now, just bringing people together, getting them on board with what you do, and then using that to make money somehow.
Is there a certain amount of people, a size of a community you think that's important, that you need to have in order to be able to, say, create a sustainable business? Is there a number that you could put on it? I know that I've heard like the 1,000 true fans. Is there something like that we could...
Yeah, sometimes I say that 1,000 in terms of if you're growing an email list, but at the same time, I think it really just depends on your business, because if you're a web designer selling a $5,000 website, you only probably need like one client to make a full-time income from that every month. So if you only need one client, then maybe if you get like 10 people to view your website, one of them will end up being a client if your marketing, your messaging, and your website are all on point. So it depends on a number of factors. And I've said for a long time, like, get 1,000 or 500 people on your email list and that will be great. But the more I think about it, the more that feels too subjective, because it is that it could be a higher price and you only need one person, or because maybe you get 10,000 people, but your website is really confusing and people don't really understand what you're selling and your marketing needs work, then even 10,000 might not be enough. So I think it's kind of dialing in all of these other factors of creating a community, really focusing on not just the money, but bringing people together in a significant way. And then also, how are you marketing your stuff and how are you making the value of it really clear? Because people don't care what they're buying. They care what the difference it's going to make in their life will have on them. So figuring out what that is and then making sure it's really clear to those people.
When you started doing the service-based stuff, did you have a price set in mind for like, I'm going to be really high end? Because when I started out, I was in college making videos, and I would make $100 for a video, $300 for a video, which would require countless hours, 30, 40 hours. A lot of times I was just making $10 an hour on a video. Right. But slowly over time kept pushing and building up my business more and more. Did you have an idea in mind of what you were going to start at, or did you have to start from the ground like me?
Yeah, I definitely was not high end. I was like crap end, like very low end. I was the same way where I thought I will see what everyone else is charging who has a similar skill level, and then I'll do like half that for my prices and I'll make it really cheap.
Right, yeah. Just undercut everybody else.
Yeah. And it was also from this belief, I think, of maybe I'm not worthy of charging that much money, and maybe people won't want to hire me or they won't be happy with what I give them. And I think it kind of goes back to that idea of just when you get over the doubt, it's related to just doing something. So I did it. I charged really low prices. I think I charged like a whole website for maybe $200, which takes a really long time. But
yeah, wow. So okay. So that's like that. So in terms of designing an entire website, you're just like, did you do the logo and stuff too, or is this just building out? I mean, not just, but building out the website, the homepage, about everything.
I think that was one of my first projects. That was like the homepage, all these different pages on their website, a shop page. But I quickly learned that this is not worth my time, and I should probably charge more because I know the value that I'm bringing to people too. And I could start to see that, like when I would give them a new design, it would make a difference for their business and their blog. So I started. That must
have been pretty cool though, right? Nonetheless, to get $200, you're like, oh, sweet money.
Yeah, I remember the first time I made $10. I think I sold like an ad space on my website, and I was like, what? I just made $10 and it wasn't from my job. Maybe I can make 10 more. And yeah, it was so exciting.
Yeah, I made $100. I just followed around a clothing company for an entire day, like 8 to 10 hours. No idea what it was going to be, why I was even filming them. And then he went to the ATM at a restaurant at the end of the day, pulled out $100 and gave it to me. And I was like, holy shit. Like, this is my first time legitimately making money as an entrepreneur. It doesn't matter how much that first project is. I think it does unlock something in you to say, this is possible. I can actually build upon this.
Right. It almost seems easy. You're like, well, now I just need to get more people like that person. And maybe now I'll actually charge them something because now I'm a real filmmaker, Yeah,
it gives you that confidence that you need. Yeah. And how much of it comes from confidence in terms of growing a business? Can you run solely on confidence, or I guess what balance of actual skill versus confidence do you need?
I mean, I think skill is important, but skill you can learn. I think confidence is something that is either inherent, but more often is something that takes a lot of practice to get to. And I think to get to that point, you just start doing the stuff that you're not confident in or you're scared to do. And it builds that confidence. But I also think it takes a level of commitment and consistency and personal integrity. So we hear a lot about integrity to other people and being honest, but I think what a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with are the commitments that they make to themselves and the commitment that they have for their business. So maybe you know what you should be doing, but having that commitment to, okay, I'm going to publish a blog post weekly, or I'm going to create this online course by XYZ date, and keeping those promises to yourself. Because the more we learn to not trust ourselves, the more we fall into those patterns and don't actually create the business that we want to.
Why do we quit, in your experience, before we follow through with a project?
I think a lot of it is fear-based. I think a lot of people, because it's not something that we really learn how to do in school. We learn a lot of other stuff that most of it we don't really use. It teaches us kind of how to think about things, but not what we need to be thinking about in school. So I think we just don't know how to do it. And we think, well, maybe the people who did it are just special, or they had luck or something. And so we try and don't get results quickly and think, well, I'm just not cut out for this. And I think that is really faulty, because how many things in our lives do we try and get it right on the first time? And how many things are we good at that we try one day and then all of a sudden are experts at? So I think for anyone who's feeling that way, if they're thinking like, well, I tried this for a couple months and it's not really working out, maybe I'm just not cut out for this. I'm not like the people who can do it. I think it's just a matter of, what do you need to learn about your business or whatever it is that you're trying to create in order to create that thing? And then also, who do you need to become in order to make that happen? Do you need to mend something in your life that's constantly holding you back? Maybe you have this doubt that comes from your past because one of your parents always told you that you're never going to amount to anything or something like that. So what do you need to mend? And how are you going to create that business? What do you need to learn in order to do that?
Is motivation overrated in this sense? Because I think a lot of personal development tends to lend itself to like, you can do it, just really hostile encouragement, which I think has its place. And like, I listen to a Tony Robbins audio tape and I feel like I'm going to take over the world.
Yeah.
That motivation tends to, just like our thoughts, it fades, and then we end up going back into our daily routine and forgetting everything that Tony told us. So at what point does motivation help us and encourage us? And in which ways do you use motivation in your life?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right in saying that motivation eventually fades, because I think that's the experience for everyone. And that's also part of, I think, where people get hung up on, well, I don't feel motivated today and I didn't feel motivated yesterday, so maybe I'm just not cut out for working for myself. And I feel unmotivated some days even now. And I don't think that it's a thing where you just are able to put yourself in the motivated state of mind. I think it's something where it's kind of going back to that commitment and that personal integrity to yourself, where you might not feel motivated every day, and that's actually completely normal. Most people don't. And if you do, then tell me what supplements you're taking, because
Yeah.
I would love to know. But for most people, you have to just literally know what your priorities are for the day and then just start doing them. I found that the first few minutes of doing a task I'm dreading is the worst. And then I get into it and I'm like, okay, this is not that bad. And it's actually taking way less time than I thought it would.
Oh man, I feel like that happens for everything I do. Like every project. If I'm going to sit down and edit a podcast, I'm like, I don't want to do it. I should. And that's the classic procrastination. And then we end up doing something. We clean the house, something totally unrelated to what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
But what is you ever hear of Stephen Pressfield, The Resistance? He's got a great book just about. It's actually, I think it's called Do the Work. I don't think it's called The Resistance, but he kind of labels this feeling as the resistance. It holds us back from sitting down and doing the work. But once we sit down, that's the hardest part. Once you actually 5-10 minutes into a project, all that stuff fades away, and then you actually find the things that you enjoy about that project.
Right. It's so interesting. I wonder what the psychology is behind that, or if there is any research about it.
Right. Like if you think about like evolutionary biology, and it's like, why would we procrastinate? Like you wouldn't procrastinate 10,000, 15,000 years ago when you need to go out and find food and hunt and gather. Yeah. Why do we procrastinate now? I don't know. Yeah. Maybe there's nothing there. Maybe flaw in humans. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe it's something to do with just change. I think sometimes our survival feels dependent on things staying the same and not changing. And maybe it's kind of like when we get up to edit our podcast or to work on whatever it is, we are kind of changing the state that we're in. We're like pushing something almost. And maybe part of us is like, no, I don't want to do that. Yeah, that's a great point. And I just kind of was thinking also like some of this stuff doesn't apply to modern people, because I don't think 15,000 years ago people were like Neanderthals were on computers editing together podcasts. So maybe in that sense, maybe they're little like bird calls or something. Yeah, maybe that's it. Yeah, making music. Yeah. But all right, I find that to be really fascinating. Just the motivation, because I don't think it comes down to motivation. I think it helps, but I don't think it's everything. Right. I think you do have to really enjoy the work you're doing. At what point, say we're still talking about the the design business. Did you enjoy doing that? Was that fulfilling for you?
I did for about a year and a half, and then it became massively unfulfilling for me. It started to feel almost like I was getting back into a corporate job. Or I guess I never really worked in a corporate job, but having a boss tell me what to do, because I had all these clients who were essentially doing the same thing. And I felt like I was kind of designing the same things for everybody. Everybody wanted the same looking website, what was on trend. And it didn't feel like that fun, creative thing that it once was. And I started to also feel like trapped because I wasn't teaching. And I think that was something that I really missed just about what I love doing. So it did get to a point where it wasn't fun for me anymore. It wasn't my true purpose or my passion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think fun is a little bit more difficult to describe in this sense, because like when I'm doing the work that fulfills me and that I really enjoy doing, it's not like I'm like smiling the whole time like a maniac. Like it's not fun. Like sometimes like there's a lot of joy and there is fun parts to it.
Yeah.
But I think fulfilling is probably the most important way to see it.
Mm-hmm.
So you needed to find something that would then fulfill you.
Yeah.
And what was that?
So I started teaching online courses. As I was growing my web design business, I was getting questions from people on my blog, because I'd kind of talk about it there, what I was doing to grow the web design business. And I'd get questions from people all the time about, how are you growing this blog audience? Where are you getting traffic from? How are you getting people on your email list so quickly? And then how are you growing this web design business? Like, where are you getting all these clients from? You kind of came out of nowhere and now you have this thriving business. And I took that as a sense of, maybe I should start talking about this stuff for other people if it seems like so many people are interested in this. So came out with some of my first online courses, and that became what I do now. And for me, I feel like things shift a lot, and I really just try to go with the flow as much as I can. So it started as a blog, became a web design studio when I felt like that was the right thing. And I had some other things in between too. I did some coaching and I had a little greeting card shop. I kind of just think it's important to follow what feels right to you at the same time as trying to make good career decisions. But it's important, I think, to just kind of follow that gut feeling of, this seems like the right thing for me to be doing or trying, even if it doesn't work out. And so I got to that point with my web design business too, where I thought, this is just not working anymore. I'm going to try something else. And even now with my course business, I'm kind of shifting more to talking about personal development versus marketing strategies. So I think it's really just about that ebbing and flowing and being okay with that, and not trying to like grasp onto anything too hard, because it might change in the future, and that's kind of normal.
It reminds me what we were talking about before we started the podcast. You were saying that you grew this business that was thriving and was doing really well, and you were making an income off of it, a sustaining income. And but in a lot of ways, it felt like the rat race that someone might have in a corporate 9-to-5 world, where you're not exactly focused on the priorities of it and why am I doing this? Why is this fulfilling? What is the end goal here? Am I just going for likes or for clicks or for downloads? So what was that realization for you? How did you come about that maybe you were kind of running off course a little bit?
Right. So 2015, for about half the year, I did my web design studio. Then I transitioned to courses and they started doing really well. And I was like, oh, I could do this full time. This will be my new thing. 2016, things just completely shot up. We did over $1 million in revenue with courses. And I started the year thinking, I want to help people and I want to teach people and I want to help them grow their own businesses, because this has been so fun and fulfilling for me. And then it turned into this thing of, well, now that I'm at this level, I need to go for the next level. And now that I hit this goal, I need to shoot for the next goal. And it always became this thing where it was like, what's next? What's next? What's next? And never taking time to think, is this actually fulfilling me? Am I really helping people? Am I still remembering all the reasons why I started this whole business and blog in the first place? Or am I forgetting what my real purpose is? And it kind of happened when I was at a conference last year. I actually just went to the same conference again a couple weeks ago. I was at this conference, this spoken word artist named NQ, I think he lives in LA. He was performing and he talks a lot about kind of this type of stuff. It talks a lot about politics and about how we get caught up in the rat race and how we need to remember kind of our our connection, and that's not just what life is all about, money and status and all of that kind of stuff. And I remember just sitting in this auditorium and everyone else was like, yeah, he's so good. Oh my gosh, this guy's great. And I was like trying to hide the fact that I was bawling because it hit me. And I was like, oh my God, I am that person. And I'm the person that I never thought I would become and never wanted to be, that I was so focused on the growth and the comparison, being the best and all of those types of things. And so I remember at that conference during lunch, my friends were like, do you want to go get something to eat? Because that's what we would do each break during the conference. And I was like, no, I'm going to take this by myself. And I walked to a CVS, bought a little yellow notebook and a pen, bottle of water, and I walked to a park and sat at a table by myself and just wrote out everything that I'd been feeling over the past year about how I wasn't being honest with my identity and how I was getting wrapped up in something that didn't feel like me. And started to make plans for how I could change that about myself and about my business and what I focus on. And since then, that was about a year ago. Since then, we've made a lot of shifts. We've started focusing more on giving back and doing charitable things, and also just focusing less on the numbers and more on the people and how are we helping people and how are we creating community in a deep, intimate way. And the money comes, like it still comes, and that's not even a factor anymore. It's kind of like when you start focusing on the things that actually matter, at least this is my experience, then the things that you want or the things that you need will come anyways. And you'll be happy because you're focusing on your true purpose and true mission, and your business will still be growing. So that's been my experience with just kind of coming back to, this is what I actually need in my life. This is what's actually fulfilling for me, versus getting wrapped up in that, like you said, the rat race.
Yeah, that story sounds remarkably familiar to a lot of people that we interviewed with for our documentary Minimalism. Most people had done it through the corporate 9-to-5 world, and they broke away from it, then started like a blog or started their own business, and then they were able to grow from there with the meaning kind of packed in.
Yeah.
But if you're not starting from that place of building out, say, your life, which is a lot of times our work is our life, and to have a work-life balance is not always necessary if everything that you're doing in your work life contributes to your personal life and back and forth.
Right.
So that story, I feel like it just reminds me that even with what I'm doing now, even for everybody I know and appreciate online, you always have to remind yourself the reason why you're doing it. Mm-hmm. And money, there's a limit to where that goes. And millions of dollars you could be making every year, that's not going to fulfill you and make you happy, just because all you're going to be looking at is what's the next number on top. 10 million. Okay, then it's 20 million. And I guess from even because my life is also deeply riddled from the beginning of money problems, being $100,000 in student loan debt. So for me, it was always about like, I just want to get out of debt and I want to get this freedom. Mm-hmm. And then I get some money saved up and now I feel comfortable. But then you always have this new threshold, even like when you're saving up money, where you're like, if I have $5,000 in the bank, oh my God, like I feel so comfortable. And then 10 or 15,000, but then you just kind of keep stretching that, and your mindset tends to shift in terms of what you're okay with. And that's the same thing with a salary. How do you approach money and finance, and how do you view it now in terms of how you apply it to both your personal and your professional life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, such an interesting question and topic. I was kind of similar in that I had money problems too. It wasn't in my adult life, but growing up with my mom, after my parents got divorced, she didn't have very much money. So we'd kind of live in motels or studio apartments, didn't have a car for a long time. And so that was often part of my story. And so for me, how that showed up in my business was that I at first didn't want to spend any money. I was like, I don't want to invest anything because I need to hoard this money. And then after that became this thing where it was like, now I need to get rid of this money because I feel really weird having money because I never had that before. So it was almost this dichotomy of, how do I figure that out for myself? How do I feel okay about this when other people don't have money and all that kind of stuff? And figuring that part of my identity out.
Obviously, the closely interlinked. but how do you approach your own personal finances?
Right. I like what you said about how kind of the threshold keeps building. It's like you thought 5,000 was great, and then it's 10,000 and then 15,000. And I think, and that's kind of been how it's been for me too. It's like the new normal. And you try and shoot for, maintain certain levels of income, I guess, or savings, or being able to pay off debt and things like that. But I think for that too, I think just in general, it's important to check back in with yourself and journal or meditate and figure out, okay, well, that was my goal last month. And now that I've hit it, what's next? And is this something that I'm shooting for because I think it'll impress other people, or that it'll give me higher status or whatever? Or is it something I actually need and want that will fulfill me? So I think with money too, it's important to always check back in with yourself and make sure that you're shooting for something that is bringing you the lifestyle you want, but not like killing you for it. Because I think a lot of people will be like, I want to make 6 figures, or I want to make XYZ amount of money. But then when they go back to their life, they don't even need that much money to have a great, comfortable life and to buy the things that they want and need. And yet they're killing themselves, working tons of hours every week to make that much money for things they don't even want or need, or that will fulfill them. So I think that's important too, just kind of checking back in with, do I need this? Is it fulfilling me? Or am I just struggling for nothing?
Yeah. Every good book on personal finance that I've read, from Reminisce, I Will Teach You to Be Rich, Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover. Tony Robbins has a couple books now on personal finance. And the biggest thing is first identifying what you want your life to look like. How much money are you going to need when you retire? And these questions are sometimes boring for people, especially young people in college that are just getting their life going and just starting to make a salary. It's kind of boring to think about, all right, how much money am I going to need when I retire? Let me sit down and actually do the math. But I think when you do that, I think people might be torn as to how much they realize they will need once they retire, because a lot of people just don't think about it. And you're like, you're probably going to need like $1 million, $2 million when you're 65 years old if you plan on retiring at 65.
Right.
Like, you need to have a 401k and have money you can't depend on the government to take care of you once you retire. You need to really take responsibility for yourself. Right. And for me, like $2 million, it sounds like a lot of money, but if you're putting away $5,000 every year, you will reach that goal by the time you're 65.
Right. I think I was listening to a podcast this morning that said something like 70% of Americans have nothing saved for retirement.
It's really depressing.
It's scary. I was just talking to my dad yesterday about like saving for retirement. I haven't started that yet, but will before the end of the year.
Gotta do it.
I know. Yeah, no, it's definitely something that's on my mind. And it's crazy just thinking of all those people who haven't saved at all.
Yeah, so. Because I think the first thing to do is, obviously, in terms of personal finance, is to have a little bit of a security net in case because anything that will go wrong, will go wrong. Your car needs to get repaired. You have a flat tire. Your insurance premiums go up. Like, these are things that you need to be ready for.
Yeah.
And for me, I feel like I don't think that goes against this principle of money is not important. I think money is important, and I don't think we're saying money is not important, but as in, like, it's not everything. Yeah. Like, how much money you make, your net worth isn't your worth of who you are as a human. Yeah. Though you can still be conservative in terms and careful and make calculated decisions about the decisions you make based upon the money that you currently have and how secure and safe you feel. Because, there's always going to be a new normal. There's always going to be a threshold that you can kind of get by without. Right.
I kind of think of it as just like another relationship in your life where, like you said, it's important, but it's not everything. It's like your partner should be important to you, but if they're everything in your life, then that's kind of a bad cycle to be in, right? Because if you lose that thing, then it's just your whole life crumbles. And I think it's the same way with money. Like, it should be important, but if your entire self-worth, which mine was last year, is dependent on how much money you make, then it's an unhealthy relationship, and finding ways to make it more healthy.
It seems counterintuitive for somebody to run a business and not think about money. do you think about money at all in terms of your business and your growth? Like you said, you don't look at the numbers, but you probably do a little bit, but it's not what drives you. What's that balance there?
Yeah, I definitely, I care about money. I do look at numbers. I meet with my bookkeeper every month to go over our profit and loss statement and all that kind of stuff. We have goals when we launch products and things like that, revenue goals. But I think it kind of goes back to that relationship idea. It's like you could be dating someone and they're important to you. You love them, you care about them, you love spending time with them. But if they're everything in your world, then something's off. It's not healthy, right? So I think it's the same thing with money. Make it important and really cherish it and find ways to grow it and maintain it. But don't put all of your self-worth into it. So I think for me, it's just kind of removing some of that attachment that I had to it, and largely my own attachment of, like I mentioned, my self-worth to my bank account, and removing that, but still caring about, are we growing the business and how much are we making and all that kind of stuff. So it's been a balance.
Right. Yeah. I think it's always a balance. And you have to, like you said, where maybe your business was going down the wrong path a little bit, but then you just readjust course, and it's never too late to readjust.
Yeah.
When you went into that CVS, got that notebook, started jotting down these notes and this inspiration for the direction you wanted your business to head, how did that look like over the course of that next year? And how did, I guess, what were some of the effects of that decision?
Mm-hmm. So one of the biggest things was we started focusing more on giving money that we were making in the business to organizations that we cared about. So a couple months after that event, we hosted a fundraiser and hosted it for an organization called Pencils of Promise that builds schools, does teacher and sanitation trainings in underprivileged countries, underdeveloped countries. So we raised about $120,000 then. And for me, it almost triggered this sense of abundance. Like, oh my gosh, we can raise a lot of money. I was giving away my courses in exchange for donations, so I was losing some money in that sense too. But we can raise money for these organizations and do good, and it doesn't hurt me at all. I don't feel like I'm losing out, which I think I almost had that sense before, where it was like I needed to hoard everything, otherwise I was going to be losing something. So changing that mindset to just abundance and giving and doing more fundraisers and all that kind of stuff. And then also focusing more on community versus money. So we, in 2016, we launched products where we kind of open them for enrollment, and you make a bunch of money during a couple weeks, and then you close it for enrollment, and then that's kind of closed. I think we did that 6 times in 2016, and in 2017, we've only done that twice. And for me, and we're making double what we did last year. So for me, it's more of going back and refining what we did versus just always focusing on, okay, we need this big spike of money and we need to make more and that kind of thing, to focusing more on just letting it be easy and taking care of myself and being able to travel and see people without hustling for 80 hours a week to try and launch all of these things and make more and more money. So it's like I said earlier, where it's like when you focus on the things that you actually care about and the things that feel purposeful to you, then the money just ends up coming. And obviously there's some tactics and stuff to that, how we were able to grow it without launching products as much. But I think kind of focusing on the ease of things rather than the grind and the hustle all of the time really makes a difference too.
I feel like there's always room for that optimization. You could fill your website with banner ads every which way, and yeah, your revenue might increase, but there's definitely a downside to that as well, where you perhaps lose some integrity, you lose some respect from your audience. Your audience might get frustrated. You don't want them to go to your website and get frustrated in the same way that maybe doing something like that, where you're kind of rushing to get these spikes while it taps into what might be a consumer drive to buy something. There's the tactics, and I'm curious about the tactics that you use, because I think tactics are important, and we're all human, and we all, the people who are creating a message, I want people to listen to this podcast. I think somebody can get something out of it. I don't want to do anything that I would think is unethical or immoral to get that, but obviously there are things that aren't immoral and ethical that you can do to help get your message out there. So what are the ways in which you can do that?
Yeah. So I think in terms of optimization, I work a lot with email marketing where I'll create blog posts and then I'll create email funnels where somebody will opt in for something like a free worksheet or something like that. They'll opt in for my email list and then I'll put them through different series of emails that they get that provide value, teach them something, but then eventually pitch one of my courses or products to them. So that's about half of our revenue. So for me, a lot of that optimization comes from how do we get more people on the email list? How do we attract more of the right people into our community? And then how can we optimize the emails that we're sending or the sales pages that they're looking at? Or we do webinars too. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but basically teaching an online class and then pitching something at the end. So how can we optimize those things? So I think that's a big part of what we've been working on. And then another piece to it too goes back to this idea of community. How am I showing up in a way where people can actually connect with me as a human versus a business that sells courses? And how am I opening myself up? How am I being vulnerable? Or how am I doing more video stuff versus just writing blog posts so that people really get more of a sense of who I am? And I think that all goes into it too, is just how can people connect to you? And then what's your marketing and optimization funnel looking like? So those have been two of my biggest focuses this year.
Okay, great. So let's help the Ground Up Show. And let's help my personal business, and maybe we'll come up with like a strategy for me to be able. I guess we have to figure out the goal first.
Sure.
So it would be, what do I want to do? It's tough because I guess like right now my main driver isn't to make money, but I guess to have a sustainable business would be good in terms of. To give you a little bit of background, like I've been doing the client work for a very long time and I'm slowing down on the client work. I would love to be able to do the podcast full time, create original projects full time. Some of them would be in the realm of like a Netflix release, which wouldn't kind of have that world of say my personal content that I create for an audience. But I'm starting to build an audience. What should my goal be? Help me out. What should my goal be? Should it be to make money, to make my first like viable product or a course, or maybe I make a film? Maybe I make like a 20-minute film that I want to sell.
Well, what excites you of those options?
What excites me? That's a really good question. I just did a film called Unstuck, which was a free film. So this is me starting to create original content. I made a film called Unstuck, which was my experience making minimalism, my experience growing up with $100,000, or not growing up, but graduating college in 2010 with $97,000 in debt, and then figuring out how to get out of debt, building a business and doing all this stuff. And then also going out and filming and finding work that was meaningful to me. So the whole thing was like the 5 steps to change. How do you change your circumstances? And we had this unique privilege of interviewing people like Leo Babauta, of Zen Habits, Joshua Becker, of Becoming Minimalist, and all these really brilliant people to determine and see how they made changes, because they all were in a place of where they felt like they were stuck. So I made this 20-minute film, and that's how I actually built up. I've got 2,000 newsletter subscribers, mostly from that film, because that's like the main thing on my website. People go there, they watch it, or they watch the trailer for it, and then they could sign up for my newsletter.
When did you release it?
I released it, well,
roughly.
I kind of said, I started out and I said, hey, here's the trailer, going to be releasing it next month. And then it took me like 3 months to make it. Okay. I just kind of put it out there.
Usual.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, I just need to make this thing. I need to get it out there.
Yeah.
And then this move to LA happened. And then, obviously I have a ton of other excuses that are totally valid. But then I just recently released it about a couple weeks ago. And I released it as in to my newsletter subscribers.
Got it.
So I have this thing that's like kind of my main funnel for getting people to sign up for my email.
And how did you get those subscribers before releasing this?
It was a trailer. And I said, it was a trailer about Unstuck and what was going to be what was going to be in the film. Sign up for my newsletter and you'll be the first to hear about it.
Okay,
and
cool.
so then I had people sign up over the course of the following 2 to 3 months, and then I just sent it back to them.
Yeah.
And that was starting from zero. So I had like 0 subscribers at that point, and then I built it up. I think I'd like to do something like that again. I'd like to create a 20-minute film. Whether it's along the same topic, same themes, purpose, living a meaningful life, maybe like my personal stories as well, going deeper into that. So let's say I want to make a 20-minute film, and then I want to be able to monetize it, because Unstuck was not, I didn't make any money from it. I just got subscribers.
Yeah.
Right. How would we go about doing that?
What avenues do you see for monetizing something like that?
As in what, how to distribute?
How would you make money from something like that?
A pay per view, I guess, or not pay per view, but pay per watch. So
Like
you have like a
download,
Vimeo wall where somebody would pay $5 or $10 to watch it.
So the only thing I would say about that is that if you're charging $5-10, which makes sense for downloading a movie, right? You would need a lot of customers every month to make a full-time income. If you're making $5,000 a month, that would be, I think, 500 people per month if you charge $10. So what I would do is create something similar. It sounds like actually the video you made, I'm sure it's really high quality, and it sounds like it goes through different steps of how to get out of debt, how do you start your own business. And I feel like you could package that same thing up and put the same cinematic qualities into it, but create some sort of course where you could then charge more like $500 or $1,000 for the same knowledge, maybe obviously a little bit longer, but the same knowledge that you would be putting in there.
Yeah, isn't that hilarious? I have actually had the same thought before, and it's something I've talked to Josh and Ryan from The Minimalist about, is kind of creating a course.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good point. Yeah.
Tell me.
No, well, like this is what you're talking about with like the doubt and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's not even the doubt. It's like, I do have to get clear with my goals, but I'm just thinking in my head, I could create a personal Matt D'Avella course, build up my own brand, or I could continue to partner with people like my friends Josh and Ryan, and I could make a course with them, and they have audience of millions, and the course would be way more successful, and it'd be quicker to get off the ground. So I'm like, and that's something we've talked about, we're probably going to do. Maybe it's a separate project.
Yeah. Well, no one's saying you can't do both.
Yeah. You could do both. You could
absolutely
why not
do
both?
Yeah.
I think for actually these purposes, I do want to start up I want to build my own brand and be self-reliant.
Right. I think that's huge.
From my own audience. So I think that's a great point. That's something I've thought of, and it's just like kind of refreshing and knocking sense into me that I think
you should do it.
For whatever reason, like short films, like you just can't make a lot of money doing it. People value a course more, but I think you also, it makes you step up your game a bit. That you're not just necessarily creating something that's emotionally fulfilling, but something that's also going to motivate people to take action and to kind of lay out a process.
Right. Teach them something.
Right. So say if I was going to do a course, $100, and I'm sure you could do different levels, right? You get certain things included with it. You would probably suggest not to include coaching with something like that, or would you?
If you did, then I would make it a much higher price point. Right. Where maybe it's only 10 people who pay $1,000 or $2,000 and they get a couple coaching calls. Because I think it's also what I see some people do, and what I also did during one of my launches was offer coaching, because you think, well, I can make a lot more money if I do that. But then you get all these people who buy it and you're like, God, I wish I didn't do that, because now I have to do all these coaching sessions. So I think just what do you want in your life kind of thing too.
It's not that scalable.
Right.
If you like you said, maybe you can do 10, it could be like an elite training session, but that's a good point. Because I have had some people asking me for the coaching stuff, and I've just been putting it off because I'm like, I love helping people, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't know if that's something that I want to do for my business right now.
Right. Takes a lot of time. And I think too, if you create a course, then you can create some kind of email sales funnel like we were talking about, and have that just run all the time. And adding an element of coaching kind of makes it a little bit more difficult, because then it'll rely on your timeline throughout the year. If people are buying it at just random times whenever they want to. So making it super evergreen, where just they can buy it anytime they want, watch it, and you don't need to be part of that process at all, I think is awesome.
Okay. So I make the Unstuck course, and it's going to be the 10 steps to change now. It's the 5 steps to change, but I'm going to package it into a course. What do I do now?
Yeah.
I've made it, right? I've made the course. It's great. It's going to really change people's lives. What do I do now?
Yeah, well, I think the fact that you created that 20-minute video on a similar topic already, and you're using that as a way to get people on your email list, is fantastic, because you know that those 2,000 people on your list right now, which is amazing that you did that in 2 to 3 months. That's awesome.
Thank you.
You know that those people are going to be interested in this topic. And if they watched the 20-minute video and now you follow up with them in an email and say, hey, by the way, if you liked Unstuck, well, I'm coming out with Unstuck, the course, to dive deeper into how to actually implement this stuff for your life and how to really get results from everything that you learned in the movie. Mm-hmm. And because you've done that, you'll be marketing to people that actually care about this stuff. So what I would do, you can even do this now, like once you start, I mean, honestly, you could even do this before you create the course itself and really have that kind of fire under you to get it done. But you could create some sort of marketing sequence. I would do for 7 to 14 days and create some emails that go out to your email list and really walk them through what are the benefits that they would get in this course? What's the transformation that they can see? Why did you create it? What kind of place did you come from? You mentioned that you were in debt and now you've worked through that, and talking about the emotional aspect of that and what it was like and now what it feels like to not have that burden hanging over you. And then talking about different things like myths. What kind of myths are they believing or misconceptions are they believing about their own debt or their own ability to make money? And really just walking through all of these different emotions that they might be feeling in terms of this topic through various emails that you send out. And that will get people into the right mindset that this course is actually going to work for them and that they are capable of getting results from this course. And then you can start talking about, well, here's how you buy the course and here's why you should buy it, what kind of impact and change it's going to have in your life. And one other thing that I recommend to people when they're launching a new course, any course actually, is to do a webinar where you're teaching an online class, telling people a little bit about your story, giving them some free value during 20 to 30 minutes of teaching, and then pitching your course at the end as kind of the next step. Like if you liked this content, then here's the next step if you really want to get involved with this. It's a great way to just build that trust with people and then to make sales after that. So I would do all of that for a couple weeks, and that will be your course launch. Keep it simple, just some emails and a webinar. And you can do this before you've created the content and just have some kind of sales page up. It doesn't even need to be super extensive, where you tell them, here's what you get in the course, here's how you buy it. And then when you release it in a month or two after that, then you've already got this kind of validation that people are interested in it, and you've got people paying for it before it's even created.
Right. So you don't even have to actually make it. And then then if 3 people buy it,
yeah,
I could be like, all right, guys, the course is going to happen.
Right. Yeah,
No.
you could do that.
I mean, you could theoretically, like say if it's just not a huge response, I mean, that's a really good way to engage your level of commitment to the project. So say that 7 to 14 day, 1 to 2 week launch process before leading up to the sale. How many emails? I don't send emails to I'm like really bad. I'm screwing up totally, but
It's okay.
I probably, I think I send 1 email a month, and it's not, just because I don't know. I just don't know the frequency to do it. I don't want to overdo it. Yeah. So I tend to kind of scale back on it and only send something when I have really something cool to share.
Right.
So I guess that would be just one thing, just emailing in general. How often should that contact be? I'm sure it varies. But then also with that 1 to 2 week launch, what's the frequency? I'm sure it picks up a bit.
Sure, right. So I would start by emailing weekly. And I think a lot of the times when people email monthly or just not at all, it's because they don't really know what to say. Or like you said, they want it to be really good. So then they save it all for maybe the end of the month. I would do weekly and brainstorm, like, what are some of the things that your audience, people who opted in for this Unstuck movie, what are the types of things that they would find valuable? Like maybe you can take one of the points that you talk about in Unstuck and kind of unpack it a little bit more. Or maybe it's a lesson that you learned recently kind of in regards to that topic. Or maybe it's more of like a personal story about you and going back to when you were in debt and what that felt like, and really just connecting with them more emotionally. It doesn't always have to be this massively like, here's everything I learned over the past 30 days, super valuable type of email. If you're striking any kind of an emotional chord, or you're giving value in the sense that this is something that this person hasn't heard before, it'll be valuable for them. So weekly, I would start doing that at least for like a couple months before you consider launching a course, just to build that trust and connection with them.
Sure. Yeah. It doesn't feel right to just to say, hey guys, buy this.
Yeah.
Even if it's a couple weeks, you need to kind of build that relationship with those people.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And they need to feel like they know you kind of to be able to buy something from you. And then during that 7 to 10 day launch, what I'd actually do before you launch the course is have some sort of free thing that goes out for maybe a week. Maybe it's a series of emails, like a free challenge, like the free Unstuck challenge that helps them kind of get unstuck with some very basic principles that you're teaching. Maybe you send them an email every day for 3 days or something like that. So they're getting these emails from you. They're getting into the mindset of the things you talk about in Unstuck. And then the following week, you can be like, hey, if you liked that and you got some good results from this challenge, then I'm opening up enrollment for my Unstuck course. And for those 7 to 10 days, I would email, this is going to sound crazy to you, but I would probably email almost every day. There will be a few days maybe where you don't email, maybe some on weekends especially. And then there will be days like the final day when the enrollment closes that you would want to email like 2 to 3 times. And it might sound insane and you might worry that people are going to come at you with pitchforks and just unsubscribe and hate you. But A, most people won't even notice. And B, the people who really need the course are not going to see it if you send 1 or 2 emails. So you want to make sure that if people really need this, that they're actually seeing it. So making sure to send pretty frequently. And then C is sending multiple emails on days when like the enrollment is closing to make sure that they see it. Otherwise, you'll get emails from people who are like, oh my gosh, I completely missed it after you sent them 15 emails over the span of a couple of weeks. And they're like, I didn't even see it. I forgot.
So, I mean, in terms of the open versus closed enrollment, you were saying you don't do that anymore, or is that something you suggest for? Okay.
Yeah. So you can, another avenue you can do. So I do both. Sometimes I'll open up a course and then close it. And then other times I've got courses that are just open year round. And then I have some kind of sales funnel and we do Facebook ads and that kind of thing to lead people into buying that course and really converting their mindset and all that kind of stuff to needing it.
I think probably a good takeaway here, because it can get complicated once you get into the weeds and there's like a lot that you can do.
Yeah.
I'm glad I got started, even though I started on the wrong foot and I did it totally wrong, and I probably could have optimized it in a better way and probably gotten a better open rate, say if I had released Unstuck right away, right as I was opening up my newsletter. Most important part is to get started, and then you can start to layer on these things. Like you're talking about sales funnels. Sounds complicated. Sounds like, oh, I'm not ready for that. But also I feel like the more I do this, the easier it is to start to bring these things in, to create that chain of emails, 5, 10 emails. They're already written. You know, you just kind of have to figure out the tech behind it and how to implement it.
Right. Yeah. So I would start with just the launch, get that going, get the validation, and then you can, like you said, focus on things like sales funnels, maybe creating a course with minimalists and all that kind of good stuff.
Right. How do you know what projects you're selecting and you're choosing? Is it, do you have trouble narrowing down and saying, especially for a big project, this is what I'm going to dedicate the next 3 to 6 months to?
Well, it has to be fun and fulfilling for me. I can't wake up and be like, oh my God, I have to do that thing. I hate that thing. It has to be something where I'm like, oh yes, I'm excited to do this thing today. So it has to be fun and fulfilling. And then I also want to make sure that it's going to work with my audience. So I'll usually send out a survey before I create some kind of new product. Everything that I sell now is something that I've already launched and sold before. So I've already got that validation. But if I were going to come out with a new product, I'd want to make sure that it would actually resonate and people would want to buy it. So I would send out a survey and kind of see where my audience is stuck, where they are seeing challenges or what they're struggling with, and then find those pieces that seem to be patterns with my audience. What are the things that come up over and over again with them? And which one of these things, or maybe all of them, can I package into a course or a product that's also fun for me to create and to talk about? So I think it's that balance of helping them, but also making sure I enjoy it too.
And what were some of these, to get specific, what were some of like the most recent projects that you've done?
So we recently wrapped up a launch for a course I have called Blog to Biz Hive, which takes people who have a blog right now, or maybe create some kind of content like a podcast or YouTube channel, but they're not making money or not making much, and helping them learn how to get more traffic to their website, grow their email list, and then eventually launch an online course. So pretty similar to the process we just talked about for yours.
Right. Well, that's the thing that fascinates me. And there's a parallel to freelance filmmakers, freelance designers is I know a lot of people that are really talented, and I know a lot of people who have really big followings, but the translation into income and creating a sustainable business off of that isn't always that straightforward, and it's actually really complicated. Yeah. I think in a lot of ways I lucked out, is that I had to learn from experience. I had some mentors that helped me along the way, not a lot, but I was able to at least, I had some time to be able to learn from my mistakes to build up. But I could have seen myself easily ending up in a position where I'm working a job that doesn't fulfill me, doing work that I don't like. Mm-hmm. Why do you think it's people with audiences? Is there a unique challenge to that, to actually making a sustainable business from an already built audience? I think that there's a lot of differences from that to the freelance world, and I'm curious about the unique challenges there.
Yeah. So I think you're absolutely right, where I've seen plenty of people who have 500,000 Instagram followers and are still working a corporate job because they can't make enough money from their Instagram account, or who have big audiences. I was just talking to someone recently who has an email list of 70,000 people, and she didn't know how to monetize it. And I was like, oh my gosh, you can be making so much money. It can be this huge business. Yeah. So I think a lot of it is just people come at it from the sense of wanting to provide value, wanting to create community without thinking of monetizing it quickly enough. And I waited until my email list was, I think, 8,000 people before launching my first course, which I think is way too long. And I think it's just kind of that sense of, well, I don't know what to do, or like, this is good enough, I guess, or I'm getting by. But I think if you have an audience, even if it's 1,000 people, 2,000 people, if you've got people who read your emails or follow you on Instagram, you could have a full-time business. And it's just a matter of learning the tactics. How are you going to do that? Which you could find in an online course. You could find on even Google, or talking to people, and make it happen. And you'll learn along the way too, even more strategies like we were talking about. But I think if you've got an audience, then that's the perfect just foundation for doing whatever you want, whatever kind of business you want to have.
Yeah, because people respect your voice. They obviously want to hear what you have to say, or watch and look at what you create. So there's like a huge platform to take, say, if you have a YouTube channel that has a bunch of followers, or an Instagram, there's something about what you're creating that people really like. Mm-hmm. Is it always that easy though to translate what people enjoy for free? Say like podcasting, if I don't want to put advertisements on my podcast, and a lot of people don't like doing that, ways to monetize in a way when people are used to getting stuff for free.
Well, I think it's just, what's the value that you're providing in this thing that you're packaging up? So if you have a podcast on growing a business, and that's the theme of your podcast, then maybe it's not that you have podcast episodes that people pay for. Maybe that doesn't translate. And I think it's important to have the free stuff too. Like, what are they getting that's building the relationship with you? But then if you're teaching business strategies on your podcast, then maybe you can create a course that helps people in a more packaged way understand how to start their own business. Or maybe you start doing consulting services where people can pay you for the knowledge that maybe they could get on the podcast for free, but it's not as targeted to their specific business as if they had paid you for consulting. And then they have to like sort through all of your podcast episodes to find the one that's actually going to help them. So a lot of people would be willing to pay for a course or a service or a product that maybe you even have somewhere for free, but your product or service will package it up in a way that's designed for them, and means that they don't have to go through hordes of episodes or blog posts to find the steps and try and piece it together. They actually have the formula right in front of them.
Mm-hmm. Moving forward, how are you approaching your personal growth, and who are the people that you go to for advice? What are the books that you read when you feel stuck?
Yeah. So I lately have been really making more of a commitment to my personal growth. I think I've always had this kind of on and off daily ritual where I would do all these different things. And on the days that I didn't do it, it was because I thought, well, I'm busy. It takes me like an hour to do all that stuff, and maybe I'll do it tomorrow. And I started to realize, well, if I'm not prioritizing my own growth, then what's the point of having my own business? Because this is supposed to be the type of business that gives me the freedom to do and be what I want. And once I realized that, I was like, oh, maybe I should I should have some more space and balance in my life. So for my own personal growth, I do have my daily ritual that I'm pretty committed to doing every day. I have an app called Way of Life that I love. You can put in all of your little rituals and routines that you want to do, and then every day you mark off if you completed it. And the thing I like about it is that you can't break the chain, or it kind of tells you how many days in a row you've done the thing and what your personal record is. Like yesterday I was taking a shower and it was really cold at night, and I hadn't done my cold shower yet, which is one of my routines, taking a cold shower, 1 minute cold shower. And I was like, gosh, I don't want to do this, but I know that I have my personal record right now on my cold shower, so I'm just going to do it. And I was glad that I did, because it's part of my routine and kind of that commitment to myself. But so that's one of them. And then also journaling, writing out gratitude, meditating every day, eating healthy, at least one healthy meal. If I like eat something bad, then maybe it's okay, but like something,
we're not perfect.
Yeah, we're not perfect. And then getting outside or exercising at least 5 times a week, even if it means just going for a walk around my neighborhood. I think all of those things I know impact how I show up in the world. And if I don't do them, then I start to see it after a few days. And if I do them, then I just feel like I show up more as this more vibrant, colorful version of myself. And then I also think that there'll always be things about ourselves that we can work on. Like once you work through that one thing that's been following you your whole life, then you'll get to the next level, and there'll be another thing that you could work on, and another thing. And I think that that's actually pretty inspiring, that there's always the next level of our lives. And so for me, I'm always trying to work with spiritual coaches or just personal development coaches or therapists who help me identify those things and help me translate and work through them too. So I meet with people every couple weeks, I would say, to kind of talk about those things and work through them. That's been really helpful too. And then for personal development books, I feel like I'm reading like 4 books at a time all the time.
Me too.
Yeah. So right now I'm reading Brene Brown's new book.
Heard a lot about that one.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what it's called.
Her last one was Daring Greatly. I forget the name of this one.
Yeah, this one's something like Alone in the Wilderness. I know that that's wrong, but something like that. It's been really good so far.
Yeah.
And then I'm reading A Course in Miracles Made Easy, which has been really eye-opening. That's been an amazing book.
What you were saying before, it connects to that notion of like we are perfect the way we are, but also we can be better.
Yeah.
It's contradictory, and life is contradictory.
Yeah.
But I think that sentiment, it resonates with me, even if it doesn't make sense.
Right.
And I think that's a good place to start a segment we call Quick Questions.
Ooh.
It's quick questions, not quick answers, unless you want the answers to be quick. I'm just going to ask you a list of questions here.
Okay. I love the music too.
Yeah, it's pretty good, right? It's like elevator music.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I have this whole setup literally just for 1 or 2 music tracks. So question number 1, what's easier said than done?
I think personal growth, transforming the things in your life that need to be fixed or mended. I think they're kind of like lifelong things that you need to work on, but it's so easy to say like, oh yeah, just fix that thing and your life will be perfect. But yeah, it's definitely a lifelong commitment.
How do you deal with criticism?
When I started my blog, would feel very hurt by criticism, especially in the online world. And then I started to realize that if people are criticizing me, and I'm going at more of the angle that they're mean-spirited versus constructive. If it's constructive and it's coming from a loving place, then I'm all for it. I appreciate the feedback, but a lot of the times, especially in the online world, you'll find people, and honestly, even in the regular world too, if people are mean to you or criticizing you, what I've found is that happy, stable, secure people don't go out of their way to be cruel or mean to other people. So now whenever that happens to me, I always think of what's the most loving thing that I could do to this person? What could I say to this person that makes them feel like I actually care about them versus kind of going back and trying to attack them or something like that. I've had instances where people comment on my social media and say really mean things, and I'll respond to them and say, I know you're better than this. I appreciate you. And, or things along those lines. And I get messages back sometimes from people who say, I'm crying now because your response made me feel so much better. And that's not who I am. And I don't know why I said that. And so I think whenever we get criticism or when somebody's mean to us, just remembering that it's never about us. It's always about something inside of themselves. It's they're insecure about, or that it's coming out from them in a mean-spirited way, and reacting to them with love and trying to remind them of that too.
What one skill should everyone learn?
Empathy.
What one skill have you leveraged in a way that others haven't? And let's talk about with respect to your business.
Yeah. I feel like, I don't want to say empathy again, but I feel like a lot of people in my space, in my kind of industry of teaching entrepreneurs and things like that, it can feel very business focused. And one thing that I feel like I'm good at, and that's helped me grow a community pretty quickly, is that I'm open and I'm vulnerable. I'm very transparent with, I used to do income reports where I would share everything that we spent money on that month and every way that we made money, and really just peel back the curtain of, I don't care if you know all my secrets, like here it is, you can have it. And also just sharing some of those things about my personal life that I'm working through, that I've worked through, and not feeling ashamed about those things. Somebody asked me, like, how do you share that stuff without feeling like, oh my God, I can't believe people are reading this? And for me, it's like, if it's in service of other people, then it's helping them and it's tying us more deeply together, versus if I just pretended like everything was great all the time and wasn't honest or transparent with my audience. So I think the honesty, the transparency, and the vulnerability have been really huge.
Yeah, I think the hardest thing to do is when you first start to be vulnerable online in a public way. It's difficult, but I've been doing it for a little bit, and just vulnerability and just saying, like, sometimes I have no idea what I'm talking about. Most of the time I don't. Yeah. And just be willing to say when you're wrong and to be curious about things.
Yeah.
And I've had people message me and be like, I appreciate how honest you are in your podcast. And I'm like, I guess I didn't even think about that. Like, it was obviously initially when I first started doing this, I was like, I just really want to be authentic and be myself. And then it becomes easier and easier the more you do it.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that's what ties people to you even closer.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so 2 more questions here, and then we'll be wrapped up. Name one thing people need to read, listen to, or watch before they go to bed tonight.
Ooh, I like that. Watch a talk by Wayne Dyer. Have you heard of Wayne Dyer?
I've heard of him, but I haven't watched any of his talks.
He's like a big, I want to say spiritual leader, but obviously doesn't come from any denomination or anything like that. But listening to him, I think, is hard to feel anything but connection to the world and to what you're doing in your life, and to feel like more powerful and less anxious about the things that you're working on. So I think Wayne is hugely helpful. So I would definitely say listen to something from his on YouTube. He's awesome. Great. And lastly, how should people connect with you online? So you can connect with me on my website. It's melissagriffin.com. My name's spelled a little funky. It's Melyssa. And then I have a podcast called Pursuit with Purpose, which is at pursuitwithpurpose.com. All right, Melyssa, thanks for coming on the show. Thank you so much. This is a great conversation. Thanks for listening to The Ground Up Show. If you like this podcast, there's something you can do right now to help. Head on over to iTunes and leave a quick review. I print out every single one and I put them up on my mood board above my bed. Okay, that's not true, but I still notice and appreciate every one. For more on The Ground Up Show, including behind the scenes videos, check out groundupshow.com. Thanks for listening.